Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Single Parents Daily Podcast with your hosts,
Chady Dunmore.
And Evan DeMarco. It's been a couple weeks since we've done this.
It has. We've had a lot of life happen.
A lot of life. Well, you've had a lot of life happen. We've all had a lot of life happen.
Yeah.
So before we get to today's topic, which I think is going to be a challenge, catch us up on how you've been, because you've had some medical issues. You've been in and out of the hospital, not with COVID.
Not with COVID. I'm super healthy with my health. I'm just struggling with my kidneys. I was diagnosed with a kidney disease at 4 years old, and I have kidney medullary sponge disease and polycystic. And so, it's been a struggle throughout my whole life growing up as an athlete, and then going into the bodybuilding world. I've never been one of those people who carb depleted because of my kidney disease, and I had to work harder than the average person, and I've been good since. Last year, December, I was hospitalized for 4 or 5 days with a kidney infection, and then recently, 2 weeks ago, I was hospitalized again with another kidney infection. So not sure what's being the culprit, but I'm going to see a specialist hopefully soon, and I'm doing good as of today, but it's definitely set me back a little bit, and it's given me a little bit of anxiety, to be honest.
I can imagine.
Just because with COVID, my immune system is just not, the best right now. So I'm being more cautious than ever, and I just want to be healthy. It's crazy. I just want to work out again. I haven't been able to work out since, and I feel like I keep I'm good, and then I have to stop, and then I'm good, and then I have to stop. But I think all of us are going through that in some capacity the last 6 months.
Oh, absolutely.
We're already into August right now, and
Jesus.
we've been in quarantine since March. But I'm doing better, and I'll keep you guys posted for the most part.
Good. Well, we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Yeah, whatever we can do.
Yeah, just prayers, man. I think right now it's just I'm not drinking. I'm not an avid drinker anyways, but I know that that's important. I think that for me, I just want to get back into training because of my kidney disease. It's all about, releasing toxins and so on. So sweating is important to me. And just I'm one of those people who I need to eat properly, sleep enough, drink enough water. And once I do all those three, the top three, then I'm good. So I don't know. We'll figure it out.
So it's funny that you mentioned that. I've been to the doctor a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, and as someone who prides himself on health, I've been kind of feeling some symptoms that really, to me, were COVID. Right? I'm like, I've got COVID. So I do the nose swab, and if you haven't done,
what were your symptoms? What did you feel that you're like? Okay, I got COVID.
Chest tightness. Didn't feel like I could catch my breath. Had like a mild headache. Didn't have a fever. And I didn't have my pulse ox was 99 or 100%. So I wasn't having any physical problems breathing, but I felt like I couldn't catch my breath. And of course, in this day and age, anything out of the normal, you're like, I've got COVID, I'm gonna die. So I go and do the first test, and if you haven't had a COVID test, they basically take this Q-tip and they shove it into the back of your brain. It is.
I've heard.
It's a drive-through test, and you pull in, and the guy comes up and he's like, okay, I'm going to swab your nose. And to me, swab is this gentle, circular motion.
We think our baby's swabbing.
Yeah, exactly. And so he starts putting it in my nose, and he doesn't stop. Like, it just keeps going. I'm like, dude, those are brain cells there. All I could think about was that scene from Total Recall where Arnold Schwarzenegger shoves that thing up into his brain. So take the test. It comes back negative. But I think anything that goes on with our health right now is this,
and that's another reason I think you were hesitant of us filming and shooting, because you knew what I was going through, and you didn't want to get me sick in case you were.
Exactly. And that's
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Look, that's a big part of social responsibility right now, and I think social responsibility is a great segue into the topic that we wanted to discuss.
Yes,
it's not one that I want to, but
I think this is probably the biggest topic that's going on, and that's the most important topic for being a parent.
I think it's the most important topic, period.
Yeah.
And guys,
thank you for saying that. That gives me goosebumps for you saying that, because you're absolutely right. I shouldn't have even said just being a parent.
No, and I think that there's this weird thing that we're going to talk about with this one, but guys, you can send me all the hate mail you want. It's when it comes to the most pressing issue that we face as a species. It's not COVID. It's not Black Lives Matter. It is this. So tell us what we're going to talk about today.
We're going to talk about child trafficking.
Huh.
Yeah. That's literally the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
That's going on. That's been happening for generations. And in fact, I feel like it's the worst now ever with COVID going on. It's quarantined so many people, but child trafficking has been, reported in all 50 states. It is the most scariest thing that it's literally my biggest fear in my life. I am a mother to a 14-year-old girl, which is the average age. 1 out of every 4 kids are being trafficked, and they're under the age of 13.
1 out of every 4 children born in the U.S. are being trafficked. Okay, that's an alarming statistic.
Yeah. It's not okay. They're either going to be trafficked and these are the statistics I'm getting for, I follow a page called Our Rescue, and they
Is that Operation Underground Railroad?
Yes.
So interestingly enough, your predecessor, Drew Manning, on the show, has worked a lot with Operation Underground Railroad, and we just watched him run
I apologize. It's 1 in 4 victims under 13 or younger when threatened with sextortion. So sextortion, excuse me, I just dropped something. Let me pick that up. Sextortion is basically when someone's being extorted for a certain photo, and they're going to be blackmailed, or some way they're going to be threatened in some capacity of like using to be sold.
That makes a lot of sense. And
so you were saying Drew was...
Drew, yeah, and he just, we were originally, Drew and I were going to do this together before my calf injury, is run 100 miles to raise money for Operation Underground Railroad. And when we first started talking about it, this was something that, as single parents, I was hyper passionate about. As a parent who's married, I would be hyper passionate about. As a human being, I'm hyper passionate about. And I saw a post the other day that's there are posts that make you stop and, think, and then there are posts that make you just set down the phone and I had to leave the house and just go clear my head.
Yeah.
And it was the story of a 2-year-old girl who had been raped by 36 separate men at 2 years old. And I think back to this.
It's disgusting.
And it's beyond disgusting. And I think back to this initial conversation that I had, about 6 months ago on this subject. And I think that the first response that we have as normal human beings is just rage. Give me 5 minutes in a room with any one of those 36 guys. And I can't figure out, is that the appropriate response? Is the response to fixing this problem rage? And you've brought up something interesting on your social. Again, I don't want to minimize Black Lives Matter. We've had a great conversation about that. I think that that's definitely one of the issues that we need to tackle. We know COVID is out there. We know we've got all of these problems. But why is this not the number one problem?
You know what's so effed up about all of this? If you hashtag Save the Children, they're on the algorithm from Instagram, Facebook, and other socials, they're actually minimizing the algorithm.
Why?
I have no idea. It is scary and it's alarming. And it makes me think all of 2020 has been some type of strategic way to blindside everyone with what's really going on with everything that has happened with the Epstein case. And this is just my theory, but I feel like it's just when you think about all the people who were on that island, or think about the stuff that went on that Epstein island, which is a lot of it had to do with girls who were underage and behind a lot of powerful men and women. And a lot of it's being shared now. It's a lot of stuff that we are unaware about. There's stuff that we have no idea and probably not sure if we will ever find out about. But I know that child trafficking is happening. It's happening with very powerful people. And a lot of people are trying to hide it. And it's a problem. It's a problem. And I think that us as human beings who have any compassion, you have to we all have to do something about this.
So I had a very interesting conversation on a separate project with an adult actress who's been out of the industry for a while, and we were talking a little bit about the future of relationships and how pornography plays into the future of
100%.
relationships. And she had some very interesting things to say. And I think going into a conversation with, shall we say, a porn star, there's some preconceived notions. Like, they have a certain sensibility, they have a certain moral flexibility, and it turns out I was completely wrong. And I'm very excited to admit that I was completely wrong about this person. And one of the things that she brought up within the first couple minutes of the conversation is that we have no age gate for adult content on the internet.
Yeah.
And so adult content sites have found a way to permeate some of the most benign places that our kids hang out. And I remember a story from years ago where it was like NASA.com led you to a porn site. In NASA, places where kids would be inspired to, because they say, I want to be an astronaut, would go, well, it's nasa.gov because that's a government agency. But someone had filed the URL for nasa.com and it led them to an adult site. I think that's since been taken down, but there was some alarming statistic that a vast percentage of websites were pornography.
Yeah.
And so, you've got these kids that are exposed to this early on, and I don't know if that's a phishing if there's an algorithm or if there's some technology that allows people to ultimately target children who are playing video games that might see porn or something like that. But I think it's the same thing, right? This age gate of the introduction of sexual material, and it's, I don't know what the issues are that lead to trafficking other than we've got some perverse people. And again, I'm back. I think the big issue that we're talking about here is that this is not the number one story of every news broadcast every single day until this is fixed.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like it's something that needs to be talked about all the time. There is a couple organizations that are local. Blue Heart was an organization of a friend of mine, and her, I would love to get her on the podcast because she is local. But, what's going on is that it's closer to home than what we think. In our minds, we think that child trafficking has to do with something that's going on in a particular state, and it's very rare. Maybe the parents weren't taking care of them. And in fact, a lot of these kids are being trafficked by other kids their age, by saying, hey, I'm going to make you a TikTok star. Hey, I'm going to make you an Instagram model. And then they're being groomed to be keeping communication with these kids or maybe younger adults that probably don't look like a predator. And that grooming process leads to a moment where there's weakness and they're, being invited to the house while the parents are at work because they're working because of COVID and stuff. There's no schooling now. Everything's virtual. And then the child disappears. Just like that.
Did you ever see the movie Taken?
Yes. And it's like, I hate that movie. I love it, but it's so good. But it's so scary as a parent. It is a nightmare because we're not like a CSI, like a trained SEAL person where we're tracking down. Although I feel like all of us inside have that capacity to be like that.
There's some things I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. So we're just going to skip over that conversation.
But yes, I told my daughter that I told my ex-husband that I wanted to show her that movie because I feel like there is a ignorance to and an innocence to our kids where they're on their phone and they're not paying attention. And that's where somebody can just snatch them. Just walking home from school on their phone. And somebody's just telling them. And it's little things like that where it's like that movie Taken. It was a young guy who was good looking, their age. All of a sudden, all these guys just came into the house and stole these girls and drugged them. And then they become, fixated on these drugs because they continually make them addicted to it. And then they're in a whole different world where they're like, where am I? I just need this drug. I don't feel good. And it's survival.
Human trafficking is not something that's new on this planet, right? From the dawn of time, we have always looked at people as the greatest commodity. And I remember I was in Charleston just recently and doing a walking tour of the city, and they brought us by one of the old slave houses. And it was a haunting experience to see this place. And I think that they've done a good job of commemorating the house itself as it was an auction house for slaves. Not in celebrating the history, but at least acknowledging that history exists and that it's a dark part of our history. But they said that was what made people the most money in the South.
Wow.
It wasn't crops, it wasn't cotton, it wasn't agriculture, it was slaves. And the richest people were the ones that had the biggest slave trade.
Yes.
And I mean, look back to the Egyptians, the Phoenicians. I mean, just throughout time, human trafficking has been embedded in our DNA, and it is a very dark part of our DNA. There's never an excuse in any historical context to say, yes, that was correct. When it comes to kids, like I have a hard time fathoming any person, Epstein, any of the billionaires that were associated with that, like condoning that kind of behavior. Like, at what point does someone's brain say, yes, that's okay?
Yeah.
And this is where I'd love to interview a child psychologist or a psychologist who could help us understand, because I come back to rage. Epstein, good riddance. And I'm sorry, I'm sure I'll get hate mail on that one, but
no, I'm the same way. They send me the hate mail. I can.
She'll filter it.
Yeah.
But it's, so, and maybe you guys, this is a topic we'd love to, to toss out to the community, right? Like, what is the appropriate response when we start talking about this? What is the appropriate response when we see Black Lives Matter, an important topic? We see COVID stuff all the time, but we don't see how are we protecting our kids? Because that is a tool in the tool belt that, we need viable solutions to make sure that our kids don't end up, the victim of some predator. I don't know what that is. I mean, honestly, like, people have asked me, we chip our dogs.
I know.
I would chip my kid in a nanosecond.
Yeah, I would. I know it's.
People could talk, it's an invasion. You didn't know it's not, because the world that we live in puts her in danger just by being a girl.
I know.
And, if we don't have a society that makes her safe, then it's up to us to find a way to do that. And if putting a freaking microchip in her so I know where she's at all the time solves the problem, then I'll sleep a little bit better at night.
Yeah. My brother got married last year in Mexico, and we were enjoying ourselves, and a lot of my nieces were there, all teenagers, my daughter, 13 years old, and very pretty girls just hanging out. And then all of a sudden this boy, obviously looked like he was from Mexico, he lived there, didn't look like he was traveling. So he was there, and he was getting to befriend all the girls. And I watch a lot of movies. So I had my radar on, and I literally jumped in all the conversations, and I was like, hey, so are you traveling, or do you live here, and how did you get here? Because I'm well aware about the grooming process. And hey, let's just have each other Snapchat each other phone number, right? And then how that leads to locations, right? Because in Snapchat, you can find out where the locations are at. Or all the parents are drinking, the kids are all hanging out, kids drift off to the bathroom or to whatever, and then all of a sudden the kids disappear.
Yeah.
And kids disappear all the time, especially out of the country.
Yeah.
Especially, even freaking walking down the street, going to school or from school. It's something scary. And so the kid was a local, and he just happened to be hanging out because a family member worked at the hotel. He didn't go into detail. But in my eyes, that was like a red flag.
Totally.
So I told the girls to stay the F away from him.
Yeah.
And they, were like, oh my God, you're being so, you're being that mom. I was okay. I was like, you guys, I'm going to be that mom.
Yeah.
And I made sure everybody went into their rooms and made sure no one was communicating with him on Snapchat and so on. They did take pictures with him, and he has a picture with the girls.
See, that's scary.
Yes. So, but it's little things like that it happens so quick. And so here's the thing, before we continue going the conversation, if anybody's listening to this, please go into ourrescue.org, right? Is it .org?
Yeah.
Our Rescue, OURRESCUE.org. They have a training, like it's probably a couple minutes, no more than 5 minutes. And you get to watch a couple videos, and you get to, they walk you through a process where you get a certificate. Just basically, how is trafficking happening? And if you see it happening, or you see a child being in a situation where they're being trafficked, what can you do to help them without alarming the person with them or causing danger. And they give you the appropriate phone numbers, how to contact, and to how to move forward, because it's little signs like that can actually help another child.
Well, so here's an interesting question, and again, great information,
Yeah.
right? Like, guys, go check out Operation Underground Railroad. We've talked a lot about them on Single Daddy Daily in the past, and now Single Parent Daily. An amazing organization that has devoted a significant amount of time and energy and money to protecting our kids, not just domestically but globally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of that like, right, like if you saw a kid that was in danger, would you call or would you get the kid? Because I think of it in this case, if someone took my kid and someone, like someone was in a position to do something about it, and they called up the police or they called a number, and it was that close, but not close enough. Like, to me, I don't think that I could just stand by. If I saw a kid being trafficked, I'd be like, nope, sorry. I'm stepping in.
Yeah. So it's a great question. I think anybody that under the age of 18, maybe you could step in. I don't think that's guided. I think obviously our rescue wants you to do a procedure. But as parents, we're talking straight from transparency. What would we do, right? If we see a kid who's scared and so on. A lot of times they change their haircut, their hair color. They've done it at Walmart. So they've actually dyed kids' hairs in the bathroom and left them and walked out with them changing their clothes. So in the video cameras, it looks like a different child.
Jesus.
Yes. This is real shit that's going on. They cut the kids' hair. They dye it. These are kids who are young. They have no idea what's going on. They're being lured by candy or whatever type of object, or being drugged, right? And then while they leave in the video camera, they look like different. And then they have no idea who is leaving these cameras. But what's going on is that if you go to the Vegas airports, mostly, this is the first time I've ever seen it. I don't see it in a lot of other airports, but mostly the Vegas airports, in the bathrooms, they say, and they have posters up in the women's bathroom saying, if you are in need of help, this is what you should do, or contact someone or whatnot. What the problem is that a lot of these girls are so drugged or manipulated that something could happen to them if they tell someone. There's signs for them, that stuff that they can do. For instance, there was a girl on a plane with her perpetrator who was kidnapping her or trafficking her. The lady behind her kept passing notes in their notes to her saying, are you okay? She wasn't touching it, but she kept, and I'll send you the story, sent her a note that says, are you okay? And the girl nodded no, or shook her head. Then she said, can I get you some help? And she didn't respond because she didn't even know what to do. The person next to her sleeping, the guy, he's in the middle seat and the girl's by the window. But the girl behind her knew something was up. She said she knew she couldn't respond, but just by her saying, are you okay? And she said no. She sent a letter to the stewardess, and the stewardess, by the time plane landed, police were there and they were able to help that girl.
Nice. Now,
how many of us would, those are smart moves. This is where, like, how can we do this where we don't know if he has a weapon or what he's, but, as parents or as anybody, as a civilian who wants to help someone, those are the things that we can do if we're in a situation where we can help someone. So, because at the same time too, we don't know how these people are doing it. It's a billion-dollar business. This is the most lucrative business that's bigger than drugs. And they have cartels, we don't, so we have to do it in a safe way where we're protecting ourselves, in a way where we don't want to endanger anybody who's following advice from us, where we're like, take the kid.
Yeah, no. Again, good point, Chady. Don't follow my advice. Don't do what I would do. Call the numbers, call the police. If you see something, say something. I hate to sound like TSA, but it's a good motto.
So there's a number that they give, a specific number besides 911, because there's a lot of...
I mean, if you're at an airport, too, the easiest thing is to go like, hey, that girl's in trouble. Don't let these people leave. I mean, but there are other public places where... you might not have immediate access to law, to the law to help.
Take photos of license plates. Take pictures if you can discreetly of this person, because this could be a way, a step forward to finding them. Where if it's like, hey, that's the girl that's been missing. Now let's go into the Wayfair.
Explain that.
Okay, yeah. So Wayfair is a furniture store.
Oh, like the online store.
Yes.
Yes.
So apparently there is, pillows that are worth $3,000 to $10,000. And so when you input information, there's it leaks to, let's say if you bring up a name, those lead to missing children. And then that's how kids supposedly are being trafficked. Now, this
Through
is
Wayfair?
there is hypothetical theories on that.
Okay.
Now, I can send you some information, but that freaked me out. The fact that kids are being trafficked through websites and eBay.
I mean,
I know.
it makes sense. It's just, and look, we know that in the digital world, the criminals are always a couple steps ahead of the law enforcement, right? That is an inevitability.
And some law enforcement may be involved.
That's true.
I wouldn't put it past that. I wouldn't. This is again a very lucrative business.
No.
There's judges that are being killed, that are part of cases. The Epstein judge, her husband was shot and her son was killed because she took on the Epstein case.
Jesus.
There's celebrities who do music videos on child trafficking, and all of a sudden they committed suicide, and they're gone.
And yet you wanted to bring up this topic.
I did, because it's something that I feel like it needs to be talked about. It has to be in everybody's backside of their head, and know that this is real life matters. This is not like every other state, or maybe, once in every 6 months it's happening.
Yeah.
Kids are being trafficked all the time, and we all experience it in some capacity. For me, growing up in Miami, being in the modeling industry, there was, people in the industry who were very like agents and managers who did things unprofessionally. There's, I even talked to my daughter about teachers. If a teacher threatens you or pulls you into a bathroom and says that I'm going to say that you were being really bad, or I'm going to tell your mom this, or I'm going to kill your mom, or do anything in those nature, you have to tell me, because I will believe you no matter what.
Yeah.
Whatever they are accusing you of, it is just a lot of people who, and we think it's maybe a predator that we have no idea. A lot of times it's people who are family members.
That I've heard. Yeah.
That are selling pictures. This young lady talked about her great-grandpa. Her great-grandpa, who was sodomizing her, taking pictures of her at an age from, I would say, 6 years old to about 14. And then he was selling videos and pictures of him having sex with her.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we do at our house that I learned a long time ago, and I thought was one of the most brilliant things ever, and I highly recommend this, I think I've talked a lot about it in the past, is we don't do secrets around here. No. We do surprises. And so I wanted my daughter from a very early age to know that if anyone ever says, can you keep a secret, your answer is no. Surprises are different. Surprises are like, we got a present for someone, we're not going to tell them until it's time to show them the present. There's a big difference. But secrets, I wanted to teach her early on that if anyone ever asks her to keep a secret, it's never a good thing. And if she wants to say, we don't do secrets, we do surprises, I'll tell someone at a certain point, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about what are some tools that we can do to help our kids, right? We're not going to change the billion-dollar industry. No. We're not going to change all of that from the top down. I think we have to change it from the bottom up. And I think the best way to do that is to make it no longer profitable. And I hate to say that, but if drugs become more profitable than human trafficking, then let's let the DEA. But if it becomes difficult for people to start trafficking in kids, then we've solved the problem. I remember talking about this, right? This is a war of attrition. And this war does not end until we've won. It does not end until every single kid on this planet never has to worry about that again.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a war that we can ever win, but you can bet your fucking bottom dollar that we're going to try.
Yeah.
So I think that, part of what we have to talk about here is how do we arm our kids? How do we arm ourselves with the knowledge to ensure that we're the most vigilant that we can be in situations like this? Have you read anything that, okay, hold on. I've gone off on a tangent here, but you talked about like Snapchat and geo-targeting and them being able to see locations. Is there an onus on social media to stop that?
Yeah. Well, as parents, we can just make sure that activity level is not on the iPhone. But here's the problem. Those are the pros that we can have control of. The cons is I like to have the activity where she's at because I need to know where my daughter's at.
Mm-hmm.
If she's not with me, if she's with her dad, because we're co-parenting, or if she's at school, or God forbid there's a shooting, or I want to know where my daughter's at. More importantly, lost my phone. If you misplace it, you know where it's at. You can track it. I mean, kids forget their phones all the time. So there is ways where you can not allow activity locations on certain apps. But, kids don't want, especially teenagers, they don't do texting anymore. They don't text anymore. All they do is Snapchat each other because there's no evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I don't want to, like, isn't Snapchat by its very nature a deceptive app? I mean, I don't want to call it like it is, but like Snapchat, the whole point of it was so you can do something so there's no trail of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're doing something that you don't want proof of, isn't that kind of fundamentally wrong?
Yeah. It's also too like where we want to have our kids to have some type of freedom, but at the same time too, as parents, that's something where each parent has to figure out the notion of like how in depth do we want to give our kids that freedom.
I want to give my daughter a rotary phone. You want to make a call? Oh, I screwed up. Start over.
She's like using your iCloud. It's like a different phone, but it's your iCloud.
Yeah, well, so she's at grandparents' camp right now.
Aww.
And I sent her with an iPad so that we could FaceTime while she's gone.
That's great.
It was one of those weird, interesting things. Like, I'm giving her an electronic device, but it's like that is the most stripped down electronic device in the universe. Like, it's got like one game, a copy of Frozen 2 on there, and then like Facebook's Messenger Kids, which I did some research on and I felt was a very safe app.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know they had that.
Yeah, and it works through Facebook Messenger, but it's a video app, so we can chat on that. And I have all of the control, so I get to see who she chats with. I get to see everything. And,
yeah.
Again, I don't want to act like big brother to my daughter.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that overbearing parent. I want to be, for the time being, while she's 6, in control of who's reaching out to her.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be in control of the portals in which she has to the digital world until I can teach her what she has to be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a dad. And I'm a mom. I'm very protective over my daughter. I let her have her freedom, but I also am grabbing her phone all the time and checking it. And, it's hard, man. This is like, I have a 14-year-old daughter. Imagine your daughter being 14. And
I don't want to.
The times that we're in right now.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up something a little awkward.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is relevant, but I kind of feel like it is, right? Like, where technology has given us a unique approach to relationships. As adults, I'm sure that, in your industry, I know that you've probably seen a, shall we call them a dick pic from time to time.
All the time.
All the time. I think in the mart of healthy adult relationships, we have used technology to kind of, push the boundaries of things, naked pictures, sexting, if we want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's interesting that exists as an opportunity for us. And at like what point, I think of that for my daughter, right? Like at a certain point, she's going to get in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And at what point do those things become acceptable? And then I started thinking, I'm like, shit, is it, you can do that when you're 35? I don't know. Like there's such a double standard here because technology has leveled the playing field in the context of how do some of these technologies allow us to communicate with other people. And as single parents, or single parent, you're in the dating scene. I mean, the number of naked pictures that I've gotten, like in the dating scene, you're like, okay. And in the beginning, you're like, wow, that's kind of cool. And then then I would instantly think like, well, I can never introduce you to my daughter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but now am I judging that person for technology that's available where this is behavior that we think is socially acceptable?
Yeah, well, also, too, it's different times. Like, we didn't have access to any of that shit when we were younger.
No, you just passed a note and it said, will you be my girlfriend? Check yes or no.
If that. I mean, we had beepers, sidekicks. Like, it just was a whole different world. Like, even communicating, passing a song, it was like a radio station, right?
Yeah.
I even did
Make a mixtape for someone.
We're aging ourselves. But let's go back to this, our kids. Like our kids are.
Hold on, I'm going to take a break and get some Metamucil.
Our kids are like in a different playing field. It's a different playing field. It is, there's a lot of like barriers that, we had when you were younger. We didn't have the technology. And now, we have virtual online school now. Our kids are going back to school and it's going to be mostly virtual.
Which again,
so we can't tell their kids, you can't be on the laptop, you can't be on that. They're like, I'm doing my homework.
No, that brings up an absolutely brilliant point, Chady, is with education as a result of COVID going so digital, is how do we employ certain, safety measures to make sure that our kids are using the technology for their education, but not using it so they become vulnerable for sex trafficking.
I'm with my daughter's school, they're offering Chromebooks where I think would probably be a safer avenue versus you giving your kid a laptop and saying, here, do your homework, because the Chromebooks have, the school has access to everything that you're uploading and everything. So if they knew that a school teacher was looking at everything that you're opening up, then they'd probably be less hesitant to try to open it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But, even then, if they say, I want to do my homework on the laptop, or there's so many ways that kids can be deceitful on how to like open up different apps.
Yeah, so, this brings up an interesting thing, and guys, we don't have all the answers, but this is a topic we want to cover. So, in the comments on this one is let us know, like, what tips and tricks do you have for the community on how do you make, distance learning in the age of COVID safe? Again, talking to that adult film star, she was talking about like how certain online games, like in, like Xbox or PlayStation, like companies have found a way to geo-target or target market porn to 13 and 14-year-old boys. So there's a digital path towards this stuff, and it would be really interesting to know what resources we have as parents to ensure the safety of our kids.
They were talking about how Pornhub was having a lot of underage girls videos being on there, and there's no like discretion or which is how the fuck is this like acceptable? Yeah,
well, and I think that in talking to this adult film star, she was very adamant that there needs to be age gates to to pornography. Is that is it healthy? Is the debate is a very interesting debate, but it has to be a debate within the confines of, is it healthy for consenting mature adults who understand the content? It's absolutely not healthy for a 13 or 14-year-old boy or a 5-year-old girl or anybody who would see that kind of content and not understand what it is, but understand the physical reactions that can occur in a body as a result of seeing that type of stuff.
Of course.
So, I was very, very impressed with this woman who talked about that, we need better trafficking of that, the bad word for that. We need better, monitoring of that. How do we ensure that kids are not being exposed to this? And I think to that extent, if they are being exposed to it, does that put them at a higher risk for trafficking? Are we utilizing technology as a sourcing tool for these traffickers?
Gateway. Yeah. That's something that we all need to be educated on and to be aware of. So yeah, we're opening to please to guide us if you guys have any ideas. Did you see the meme that was going around with saying like talking about pedophiles, like how there's a grown man basically bending down and he's all like he looks like a shadow, but there's like a small child in him that's trying to connect with another small child.
No.
Yes. And it's like basically saying like these child pedophiles don't even know that they're just like they have child trauma and they're just trying to connect with a kid their age, or they think that they're that age. And it was like a promotion. It was disgusting.
Okay, so this brings up something interesting because I saw something on social, and again, I try not to spend a lot of time there, but it was something about how pedophilia is a sexual orientation.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. I couldn't remember exactly, but that's what I'm saying.
It was like there was heterosexual, homosexual, and there was pedophilia. It was a legitimate, qualified sexual orientation. I'm like, no, that's not.
That is no. Hell no. Like, sign me up in a petition where we can, that is never going to be an orientation. That's the most disturbing thing I've ever heard in my life.
You know, we had a conversation with a sexual therapist, kind of sex after divorce, and one of the things that she said was very profound, is that sexual orientation and sexual proclivities, nothing is taboo unless it harms someone else. And pedophilia harms someone else. There's no debating that. There's no ambiguity in that. There is zero room for any conversation other than that is flat wrong.
Yes.
And whoever that person is, I'm assuming that there's some trauma in the past. I'm assuming that there's an issue that would cause that type of behavior. But, you know, the father in me says that person deserves a bullet in the back of the head. The human in me says whatever we have to do to get that person the help that they need. And that's a hard balance, I think. 'Cause
I know.
I remember, you know, what was that? What was that movie with Sam Jackson? You know, where his daughters are raped, and then I think he kills the guy that rapes them. And it's like, you know, the defense attorney says, you know, did they deserve to die? And he says, yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't seen the movie, but
what the hell's the name of that movie? You know, comment on that, guys.
All of this is just makes my stomach like in knots.
That's not the antibiotics.
It's probably both.
Guys, this is a tough one, right? And I don't know if we have any answers, but it's something that needs to, it needs to be out there. And if Facebook and Instagram and all of these companies are creating algorithms that make this not the number one topic of conversation, then it has to be the number one topic of conversations in phone calls, in FaceTimes.
Did you see any news? Like any news? Anything on the news about the protesting with Save the Children?
No.
Did you see anything on the news talked about child trafficking?
No.
Or any pedophiles that were found?
No.
I never see any of that stuff in the news. Ever.
No. And guys, you know, if this means that we have to go old school to fix this problem, if the resources that we have don't allow us, then, you know what, then, you know, tell a neighbor, tell a friend, you know, spread the word. It's, you know, make this, if we have to go old school, we go old school on this one.
I also would love to hear from the listeners if they want us to interview people in the industry that either deal with rescuing these kids, professional psychologists, because, I mean, I personally would love as a parent to hear more insight on all, you know, areas of like how this can be prevented and how we can be better.
Prevention is the big tool, right? So how do we arm ourselves and how do we arm our kids?
Yeah.
Well, good. So, guys, that's this is a tough one, right? This is a very interesting topic of conversation, and it's a beautiful day, so I don't want to...
Yeah, let's not... let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. Guys, definitely sound off on this one. What can we do to help you, help you as parents, help your kids, help on anything? Give us some comments, give us some notes, throw out some tips and tricks. What are you guys doing in the age of COVID in digital distance learning to make sure that your kids are safe? Anything that you can do to help the community understand what we can do to better protect our kids. That's why we're here. Until next time, thank you for tuning in for another edition of the Single Parent Daily Podcast with your host,
Chady Dunmore.
and Evan DeMarco. We will see you next week.
Bye, guys.